The rain pelted against the cracked windows of St. Augustine Mental Hospital, a decaying institution at the outskirts of town. Its high iron fences were draped in ivy, and its imposing towers loomed like tombstones in the mist. It had been shut down for years, and rumors of its haunted halls had kept people away until now. Mia had always been curious about the dark corners of the world. A journalist with a taste for the macabre, she had read everything about St. Augustine's grim history. Its founder, Dr. Edward Langley, had been notorious for his unorthodox methods, often testing his patients' psychological limits until they cracked. The hospital had been abandoned after a tragic fire, but the whispers persisted. The patients, they said, never left. Mia had been assigned to write an article on the place, a piece for an upcoming paranormal magazine. Armed with her camera, recorder, and the determined mindset of someone who didn't believe in ghosts, she stepped through the rusted gates, feeling both excitement and unease settle in her stomach. The air smelled of mildew and forgotten memories. The front lobby was in ruins, broken furniture, shattered glass, and graffiti that mocked the once grand walls. Mia's flashlight danced across peeling wallpaper and dust-coated floors as she moved forward, the faint echo of her footsteps reverberating down the hall. She clicked on her recorder. St. Augustine Mental Hospital, August 12, 2024. It's completely abandoned, no sign of activity yet. As she ventured deeper into the building, the temperature dropped, and a cold, oppressive weight seemed to settle over her. It felt as though the walls themselves were watching her. Mia paused in front of a door marked Ward 13. Her heart pounded in her chest, echoing in the silent corridor. Ward 13 had always been the subject of whispered rumors. Some claimed it was the site of the worst experiments, where unspeakable horrors took place, while others believed it was cursed, a place where spirits roamed freely. But curiosity, mixed with a strange sense of determination, pushed her forward, and she opened the door with a trembling hand. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of decay, a foul odor that made her gag, and the flickering lights overhead cast unsettling shadows on the walls, making the room feel alive. The room was full of old hospital beds, lined up in eerie silence, their metal frames twisted and rusted, as if they had been abandoned in a hurry, the sheets tattered and stained with age and neglect. Yet what caught Mia's attention were the walls, covered in scribbled messages. She stepped closer, her breath shallow and uneven, as she read the frantic, desperate scrawls that seemed to cry out to her. "Help me! It's in my head! I can't escape!" The words echoed in her mind, and seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy, as if the walls themselves were alive and watching her. Suddenly, Mia heard something, a soft, almost imperceptible sound. It was a whisper coming from the far corner of the room. At first, Mia thought it was just the wind, but then the voice came again, clearer this time. "Get out! Get out before it sees you!" Mia froze. She wasn't alone. She swung her flashlight toward the corner, but there was nothing there, just the shadows, stretching like long, hungry fingers. Her breath quickened, but she forced herself to move toward the voice. It had sounded so real, so desperate. The moment her foot stepped across the threshold of the next room, the door slammed shut behind her. Panic surged through her veins as she struggled to pull the door open. It wouldn't budge. She was trapped. The air grew thicker, and the whispers around her grew louder until they were a chorus of voices all around her. Some were pleading, others were angry, and all were desperate. The temperature plummeted as the shadows seemed to crowd closer. In the corner of her eye, she saw movement, a flicker of something humanoid. but it was wrong, twisted, contorted like it was caught between dimensions. It was as if reality itself was bending to accommodate this grotesque figure. A figure appeared before her, its face a blur of distorted features, eyes black as coal, its lips parted as though to scream, but no sound came. The silence was deafening, amplifying her fear. Mia stumbled back, heart racing, her mind screaming at her to run, to leave, but her legs refused to move. She felt paralyzed by an unseen force. "Do you hear it?" the figure asked, its voice like nails on a chalkboard, grating against her sanity. "Can you hear it calling you?" Mia's throat tightened as her vision blurred. The whispers seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. She was dizzy, overwhelmed by a sudden sense of vertigo. The walls seemed to close in on her. The room spun around her and the whispers turned into a maddening crescendo. It was as if the very air was alive with malevolent intent. She felt her sanity slipping, the world warping into something unrecognizable. Reality itself seemed to fracture, leaving her in a nightmare she couldn't escape. Then she saw something, an old yellowed photograph pinned to the wall, almost hidden by the shadows. The image was of the hospital staff, but there was one face that stood out among the rest, Dr. Langley. He was smiling, holding a clipboard, his eyes cold and distant, as if hiding a dark secret. But standing beside him in the shadows was a woman, barely visible but unmistakably present. Mia's heart stopped. It was her. The resemblance was uncanny, almost as if it were a mirror image. The same woman who had been in her dreams for weeks, staring at her with hollow, pleading eyes that seemed to bore into her soul. The same woman who had whispered to her every night, telling her to come, urging her to find the truth. Mia's breath caught in her throat. She wasn't supposed to be here, but the woman, she had led her here, to this very moment. The figure in the corner turned its head slowly, eyes meeting hers, and then it smiled, a slow, malicious grin that sent a chill down her spine, freezing her in place. "You were always meant to come," it whispered. "You never left." The words echoed in her mind, haunting her. Suddenly, the hospital seemed to pulse, as if it were alive, as if it were feeding off her fear, growing stronger with each passing second. The walls closed in, the lights flickering out one by one, casting long, eerie shadows that danced around her. Mia's mind fractured, and she screamed, loudly, desperately, but her voice was swallowed by the dark, leaving her in a void of silence and terror. She ran, her footsteps echoing through the empty halls, each step a desperate attempt to escape the nightmare closing in around her. Shadowy figures reached out from the walls, their ghostly hands grasping at her, trying to pull her back into the darkness. Exhausted and terrified, Mia collapsed to the floor, her body trembling as the weight of the haunting reality pressed down on her. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, there was silence, an eerie stillness that hung in the air, leaving Mia alone in the dark, her mind teetering on the edge of madness. When the search team arrived the next morning, they found the hospital in silence. No sign of Mia, no signs of struggle, just an empty recorder still running. When they listened to it, they heard only one thing. Mia's voice, barely a whisper, saying over and over, "It's in my head. It's in my head." The ward was sealed off once again. The rumors persisted and people continued to avoid the hospital. They said St. Augustine had a way of claiming the souls of those who dared to uncover its secrets, just like it had claimed Mia. And somewhere in the shadows of Ward 13, her whispers continued, a warning to anyone who might come next. "You were always meant to come. You never left."